Do you like candles? We all know that I love candles, and I love the candles from Remy Moon. They are an Australian-based small business and they make the best and most magical candles. All of their candles are made with high vibes, pure intentions, and each one is crafted with a little bit of Reiki healing that also suits the intention of the candle itself. All their candles are non-toxic and vegan, so they don't harm us or the animals. You can use the code Suburban Witch for 15% off all of their products, and it's only for listeners of the Witch Talks podcast. Simply head to remymoon.com.au to get your candles now. Welcome to Witch Talks, the series for spiritual seekers, witches, and enlightened souls. I'm Hana the Suburban Witch, professional tarot reader, astrologer, and witch, and I hope you're ready to get up close and personal with your favourite witches. Hello, beautiful people. Thank you for joining me yet again for another episode of the Witch Talks podcast. This episode was kind of a tough one to record, only because I was right in the middle of, I think, day 5 of a migraine, and I was struggling. But I don't think you can tell, but you will hear at the very end, our guest Sam does say, I hope I feel better. So you might be, if I didn't say this, you'd be like, what is he talking about? Are you okay? I'm okay. But as most of you know, I get chronic migraines, and a lot of the time I still work through them, because if I didn't, I wouldn't get any work done. So for people who may resonate with that in any way, shape or form, or anyone that has a disability, I will actually be doing a mini-sode on low energy witchcraft. So keep an eye out for that, because I'm going to be talking about how I incorporate witchcraft into my life, even though I have an invisible disability. But alas, before we jump into today's topic, which is Metal Magick, I am going to do this week's episode of Hana Help Me. Today's question comes in from Kelly, one of my beautiful Patreon members. And Kelly asks, Dear Hana, I have some black salt and I don't know what to use it for. I was thinking of putting it on some weeds. Well, Kelly, I am very grateful that you asked this question, and for everyone who has heard that may be familiar with what this will do, don't worry, I immediately said please don't put it on your weeds. We don't put salt on the garden only because it can ruin the soil. Alright, so keep salt away from your garden, please. If you do have weeds that are bothering you, you can do what I do, which is pop a little bit of white vinegar in some water. You can add a little bit of dish soap as well. And sometimes Epsom salt can be used as well. Epsom salt is different to kitchen salt or cooking salt or any of those. And then you just spray it on your weeds. I like to use that on, a path that's got stones on it, for example. And that usually does the trick. The other thing is to get a boiling kettle and pour it on the weeds, or simply pull them out of the ground. Those are your best, most eco-friendly options. But black salt itself, I think, is such a phenomenal thing to use. So some traditional ways it is used is by placing it above the mantle of your doorway from the front and the back of your home as a form of protection. Now, when we think of salt in general, not only does it clear energy, we use it a lot in clearing magic, cleansing magic, but it also it's very absorbing. Black salt in particular will absorb negative energy. It will can be used for absorbing illness, can be used for banishment, that sort of thing. Personally, I use it a ton in protective style working, so I'll have it above on the architrave, on the top of the architrave on my doors. You can put it in protective magical spell charm bags, spell bottles. Every now and then when I'm doing specific kinds of workings, it might be one where I'm using a candle or whatever I'm using as the focal point for my working, I may use black salt as a circle on the table around the work itself. Now, if you don't have black salt, and please do not get it confused with cooking black salt, which is kind of like a, I don't know what it's actually made from, but the cooking version one I know is used in a lot of vegan recipes for that eggy sulfuric style taste. My husband's been trying to get it for years. This is not what we're talking about. witch's black salt is often a mixture of actual salt and myself, I use incense ashes, or it might be charcoal ashes from previous spells and workings and things like that. Other people use herbs and other ingredients as well. You can buy it, you can make it yourself, totally up to you. But definitely don't use it on weeds or anywhere where it can get into the soil, just because it can damage basically the microbiome of the soil and prevent it from being able to grow things. You may have heard as well, and this is where people get confused, when people say the salt of the earth. So sometimes we call people like, oh, you are the salt of the earth, if they're like really reliable. And it actually comes from the Bible, I'm pretty sure from Matthew. And it's funny because the way we use it in the English language to say, oh, you're really reliable, is not actually how it's said. The actual verse says, ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost his savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. So at least in the Middle Ages, salt was used to poison the land as a punishment to landowners. We also see things like people who are worth their salt, and this just goes back to the fact that salt was often used as a currency. So whenever you hear salt of the earth, it does not mean to put salt on the earth. Please don't do that. I've even had wildflower seed packets been given out in tiny little, like mixed up with salt in tiny little bottles given out at weddings, and I was like, no, what are you doing? You're going to kill the soil. But they were like, oh, it absorbs water. I was like, you don't need to do that. Just put rice in if you want to do that. I have gone off on a tangent. Bringing it back, today's episode with Sam is really, really wonderful. I think one of my favourite things about this podcast is the variety of people I get to talk with and the variety of ways in which we see witchcraft being practiced throughout the world. Like, it's not just women that I'm talking to. It is not just men that I'm talking to. It is not just one specific type of person, and it is not one specific type of practice. And that's my favorite thing about this, because I still see people asking, I'm a man, can I still be a witch? I'm like, yes, absolutely, it's a gender neutral term. And people seeing it as this feminine thing. And so having people like Sam, who, I mean, he's a blacksmith, comes across as very typical manly man, someone that would probably get along with my dad, and he's doing witchcraft, and I just love seeing that aspect of it. It's our less loud side, I think. So please enjoy this episode. In this episode, I'm chatting with Sam Thompson about Metal Magick. Sam is a pagan and primitive blacksmith, and the focal part of his work is the magical aspect of blacksmithing. He is the author of the book Metal Never Lies, an introduction to Metal Magick, and I can't wait to chat more about today's topic with him. He is joining us via Zoom, all the way from North Carolina. Hey, Sam, welcome to the show.
Hey. Oh, it's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. Thank you very much for joining me. And as I said before we started off, I'm going to start off by pulling a tarot card for you, if that's okay. And if so, would you like a specific question answered, general guidance? Is there anything you're wanting to know?
No, not really.
Not really? Perfect.
No,
all right, let's just pull a general card then. So for every one of my guests this season, I've been pulling a card, and I always feel into, I guess, the vibes and what deck is calling to me. Do you read tarot yourself?
I do more oracle. Mm-hmm. My beloved does more tarot work. Yep. It's just not something that because I work more with the Ohm and oracle cards than I do anything else.
Yeah, fair enough. It's still cartomancy, isn't it, right? But with this one, I felt called to use the Thoth tarot deck, which I don't get called to use often with others. Like, for me, I use it personally, but it can be a little bit, if anyone's used it before, can have a little bit of a harshness to it. But let's have a little look. So maybe it's picking up on something like, he can handle it.
Yeah.
All right, let's have a look what's coming up. All right. We have what would be the equivalent to, because the Thoth is a little bit different in the way that it works to a standard tarot reading. So I'm going to show you this one. It's the equivalent to the Eight of Cups.
Okay. Interesting.
And it has some similarities, but not a lot in terms of the actual imagery. And there's a little word at the bottom that actually says indolence. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit of the theme, but there's a little bit more to it as well. So this card has a ruling of Pisces as well. So it's very watery energy. And you can see in that background, it's almost like it's sunset. We can see this, there's like a little orange strip just above the water, like we've gone down to the water in the evening. The clouds look pretty heavy. It's a little bit of a heaviness in the card. Now, traditionally, I often say that eights are cards of power. They're cards of progress. They're cards of movement, right? And we can see in this, there is water pouring out of some of these cups, but not the other ones. So I'll show you what, again, if you're watching on YouTube, there are 8 cups on the card with like an ocean in the background, basically. Now, the cups at the top are all empty. The ones in the middle are overflowing into some of the ones at the bottom, and there's one at the bottom that doesn't have any in them. And you can almost see it's like a flower that's sort of pouring this water into it as well. So it's a really interesting card, but one of the words that comes out to it is a little bit of an imbalance, okay? And it's not very stable either. Like it's a little bit imbalanced, a little bit stable. It's like it's kind of working for now, but there's some areas in life at the moment that you may have been ignoring. The vibe that I'm getting with this card is there may be it's like the word grounding is coming through. Like there's not that, but there is. It's almost a different form of grounding, right? I feel like potentially even in your practice or your day-to-day life, you're like, yeah, I'm pretty grounded, pretty down to earth. I've got all this stuff. I spend time outdoors. Like I have all of that aspect, but there's like a section that's being ignored, and it's not to do with your practice. It is maybe not to do with your work, but there's something else, either sort of a section of emotions. That's the word, like a section that you're kind of like, but that gets pushed aside. So there might be something there for you to look into, a little section that you may have been ignoring or pushing to the side that just needs to sort of be pulled back in, almost like reintegrated is the word.
Gotcha.
So have a little feel into that, have a little think into that. These cards, as I say, it feels like a difficult or a heavy thing that might have been pushed aside, and I'll just deal with that later. It's like this sweepy under the rug. And this is sort of a card to say, time to reintegrate and bring that back, even if it makes things feel like maybe that it feels like it's going to unground you. That's coming through. It may feel like it'll tip you over a little bit. That's okay. We're allowed to do that sometimes, right? You're allowed to feel the heavier stuff sometimes as well. That's a part of life. So that's that card. All right, how are we feeling now?
I'm good.
Bumpy start to the road. All right, so we're going to be chatting Metal Magick today, obviously. Now, I wanted to ask firstly, would you class metal as an element in the same way that many witches class fire, earth, air, and water as elements?
No, I think, they are, if you look at the Eastern, from my viewpoint, you look at what we consider the Far East, a lot of the Asian practices does have metal as one of their elements. I personally don't see it as one. I see it as a practice, working as far as the magic of metal. I see it as a practice similar to working with some sort of divination cards or candle magic or knot magic, or, it is a practice. I think I see it as very much standalone. So there's not you have to be of this tradition or this pathway in order to work with it. I don't think that's necessarily true. I'm speaking to my viewpoint. Yeah, I don't see it as an element, but I definitely see it as very much something that's animate.
Yep. Would you consider yourself? Would you consider yourself an animist, and therefore most things have spirit, etc.? Yeah. And metal has a very specific spirit, I guess.
I prefer personality because it just sounds better. They have their own personalities.
Metal as a whole, or the individual types of metals?
As a whole, I work primarily with four different metals. Well, I'm a blacksmith, so it's what I do for a living. So it's something that I work with, but I mainly work with iron, or I'll also call it steel. The difference between iron and steel is about 2% carbon. So it's really not a lot. So iron, copper is a big part of my practice. I do work with brass and bronze. So it's mainly just those four that I work with. I don't do anything with precious metals, silver, gold, anything like that. I don't work with anything like that because you hear blacksmithing and everybody thinks it's all forged in fire with sharp, pointy, shiny things. And there's so much more to the art than that,
Yeah,
I think.
someone, making a sword for a knight to brandish.
Not a lot of use for that, I guess there can be, right? But I always kind of look at, I see my work as a magical blacksmith is my work, speaking with a capital W, right? My work is providing tools for those so they can do their work. So I'm kind of that, supplier. That's not near as sexy as I want it to sound, but you kind of get the gist, right?
Magical middleman.
Yeah, so it's, most of my work now is commissioned. I do have stuff that you can order on the web. I ship internationally. I have shipped to Australia, so it's, not out of the realm of possibility, right? But most of my work is commissioned work to where somebody wants a specific thing. Most of all, I don't make a lot of knives and swords and spear tips and that kind of stuff. I do make them, but that's such a very small percentage of what I make for people, because it's so much more to the magic of metal than, you can get something like that and you put it up on the wall or you put it aside and you don't really, you bring, it's like the fine china, right? You only bring it out at the high holidays, and to my thought is that type of metal magic is it should be a part of your practice and something that you're doing all the time.
It's a tool.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. And a good definition is a tool, because weapons can be tools and tools can be weapons, right? So it just kind of depends on how you're looking at it, so because it's like my favorite magical metal tool is a die. It's a divination die that I make. That's my favorite tool.
That's so cool. I've never seen metal divination dice. I have my own that are divination ones, but they're
I have these things everywhere because I use them all the time. But there's a yes, right? So there's a circle, and then there's a no, which is a circle and an X. You can see that showing up, okay. And there's a blank side. So I do it for my own personal work because I don't want me to get in the way of my readings, right? Because I have enough big headedness, right, to where I don't want to interpret it wrong, because then it kind of, you're missing the point, right? So I use these to kind of check in, right? Am I understanding this correctly? Is that all? Do I need more? So I get an easy yes, no, or the blank side I use for rephrase the question. And it's really helped me ask better questions. That's my favorite tool, because I use it every day.
What metal have you used to make that one?
This is steel.
And would it have a different feel to it, do you think, if you used copper, for example?
Probably.
Yeah.
Because the metals are so different.
Energetically, how do they feel different? Like, what's your experience?
Oh, yeah, no, it's night and day. To me. Copper to me is, that was like the first metal that as humans we really got involved with, right? Hence the copper age, right? But to me, it has a very warm, kind of easygoing, almost for me, kind of a grandparent kind of feel to it. Has that wisdom. It's very gentle. Also, it's very healing as well. It's great for moving energy, right? Because chances are you're surrounded by it all day, every day, and you don't even know it, right? I mean, that's the thing about metal magic is you have access to it, and you've lost it through our time period, right? Because you've got it running through your walls carrying electricity. You're literally surrounded by this stuff all day long. You get in a great big metal box. It's got about several thousand pounds of steel that you travel around in, right? And you don't even see it. If you took an inventory of the metal in your home, you'd probably be shocked at what you have, which is part of what my book is taking you through that process of building you a good foundation, so to where you can start working with metal on a magical level.
Yeah.
To me, it's very much relationship oriented, right? I'm really big into having a relationship, and then to answer on your steel real quick, steel to me is very laser like focused, right? I have one job. That's what I do. I'm here to do one job. I do it very, very well, but I'm here to do one job. And it's, there's a lot of strength in steel, mundanely, right? Because I mean, you think of it, it's running through all your skyscrapers. It's what holds the building together for the most part. So there's a lot of strength with steel, so protection, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so you said before, steel and iron you use interchangeably. And I mean, we see iron in a lot of magical lore around, protection, and especially around things like the Fae and things like that, using railroad spikes and all of that in protection magic around the corners of the home through practices like hoodoo, especially as well, use that. So it has a long magical history.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, because my tradition is more from the Irish mythology. So that's what I know more about than I do any of the others. And you look back at the stories, at the lore, and metal weapons, they were animate. I mean, they danced around. They had, they would speak. It's where I think a lot of it came from. It was so important in that culture. That's why you swore on your sword, because it was used as a guarantor, because your sword would bear witness, right? So if you didn't live right, your sword, spear, whatever, would fail you in battle when you needed it the most. That was kind of how it kind of dealt justice, so to speak. So I think they use steel and iron interchangeably too, because it doesn't take much to get 2% of carbon in iron to make steel, because they mentioned the blue blades and tempering steel, even back as far as the Tonbo Cunha, which is the Irish epic, the story of Cuchulainn. So it has a very long history. It's not just the Irish. The Norse had it for a while. The Greeks had it, Romans, Egyptians, ad nauseum. Everybody's got some mythology associated with metal, which is great, I think.
And personally with metal, I often say when I'm teaching anything like psychometry, which is basically when you hold an object and you read the energy of the object, metal holds on to energy more than anything else, in my experience. Yes. That's why when I say, practice with a piece of jewelry from somebody, because it's going to be so much easier to read, because it's like it has this memory that, or we imprint on it somehow when we're wearing it or using it frequently. What do you think on that?
Well, one of the things about Metal Magick from my perspective, okay, and the thing that kind of caught me off guard as I was going down this journey, still continued on with it, by the way. I'm not done with it because I'm still learning stuff, right? But one of the things that really kind of made the dots connect for me more than anything else is that, particularly working with these 4 metals, is that we have as a human race, we have an intimate connection already to them. They're not separate from us. They are a part of us. I mean, we physically cannot live without iron in our body. You just can't, it can't happen. It's the same stuff that where I live, there's a very high iron concentration in our dirt, right? We have to have special filters on our well water to filter out the extra iron, right? Because there's just so much of it where we live. But you hear about people having iron poor anemia, right? Being lack of iron. It's very important that you have it. And you get into copper, you have copper, because your body needs copper in order to absorb the iron, right? So I thought that was kind of cool. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV. So just, this isn't medical advice, right? But you get into brass and bronze, and with brass, you've got zinc, right? So around here, you start to catch a cold. First thing you do is take a bunch of zinc to knock it out, right? So it's extra, but you have that mineral already in you. And then, of course, you've got tin. You have trace materials of tin. which is what makes up the bronze. So saying all that to say, when you were bringing up, it holds on to that energy, that memory. I think so because it has that intimate connection, which is not something that's necessarily separate from us. It's related to us. It's a part. We have the same. We're made up of the same stuff, right? Does that make sense? So I totally get that. Because down at the smithy, when I'll go down and work with metal, I will always, not always, I try to always ask who wants to be whatever it is I'm trying to make. So I kind of get that buy-in of right relationship to begin with. It astounds me in today's environment. Everybody's talking about right relationship, but they don't transfer that over into all of their magical life. Right? Because if you want to talk about having a right relationship with your land, with people, with plants, whatever, I think you need to also include that into your magical paraphernalia, right? Instead of taking out your thumb and waving it around, doing what you're doing and wrapping it up and throwing it in a box for another couple of months, getting back to that's a tool, but I don't know how magical that is. Right, because I think at that point for me that would be regulating it down to just a thing, right?
It needs respect.
Yeah, you can have respect for stuff like you got the fine china at Christmas and holidays and stuff that you bring out the good stuff, that everybody sees and eats, so you can have that, but it doesn't really mean anything unless you really kind of put some time into it, And I talk about that in the book about paying tribute to your magical partner, because if you're using it as a tool to aid you in your magical practice, then you have a partnership.
Yeah.
I don't know. Am I rambling? I feel like I'm rambling.
No.
It's late at night here, so it's almost past my bedtime. I'm an old geezer, so So to answer that, yeah, very much so. I think I talk a lot about in the book about taking the time to feel your metal. Right. And listen to the stories that it carries, because it has stories. The metal that I work with is all repurposed. Right. I call it upcycling. Right. So I upcycle all my stuff. And I'll get stuff like horseshoes, but they're used. Right. So they're not like new out of shiny box. They've still got the nails and stuff in them that I got to get out. And I think of all the stories that they have, as I do that for work for other people to use those. So I definitely think that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I was going to ask whether you're reusing, old metal into new items, because I think that can then, as you said, with a horseshoes also have a lot of associations with luck, and some with protection as well. So you can then incorporate that into whatever it wants to become, and you get a really unique item every time you create something new, which is fantastic and sustainable as well.
I think so. I pride myself on it. Even go as far as I actually make my own charcoal. So I don't use coal or propane or anything like that. The trees are in the woods given to me because it's already down somewhere else. So it's not like it's, I'm not harvesting it, I'm using what's available. So I try to maintain all of that and being able to touch everything that happens within that smithy. Right. It's that quality control, that I've put the sweat equity into even making the charcoal that runs the forge that helps shape the work. Right. So, or I'm a control freak, one of the two. I don't know.
No, it's like a layering of energy, I would say. It's more of a layering, which is special. And it's something that we don't have in most things that are made these days.
Well, you can go get a doodad, right, that does what it is that you need, or you can, in my way I look at it, is you can get something that becomes a legacy item for not that much more, because I know what they charge for that stuff made in parts unknown versus what I make. It is going to cost more, but you'll be able to, it's a legacy item, your grandkids will be able to use it.
We used to live in a place in the south east of Australia, which is the cold spots. And we had this beautiful old homestead that had a working blacksmith area, and they were teaching blacksmithing classes, and it was very much they'd kept everything on that homestead as it was, and it was, you could walk through it and explore it and see how life was and everything. And we actually went there when we moved into the area because we had a fireplace. We thought, let's go and get our tools for the fire, right? The little poker stick and the I don't know what they're called. The thing that
shovels and everything else.
Yeah, the
your
little
tongs.
shovel,
Yep.
all of that, the little broom. And we had them make it for us. And yes, it was pricey and it's heavy. And we lived in that place for 2 years. And then we moved to Perth, where it is super, super hot. And now we're in Queensland, where it is also super, super hot. There are no fireplaces. We don't have a fireplace, but we've kept it because we're like, I'm not getting rid of that. It's special, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know the history. No, we saw it made, like we've got it. And it's fine on all the moves. It's not going to get dinted or banged up or anything. That is solid. And it's beautiful. And who knows, we'll get a posting. My husband's in the military, so we'll probably get a posting somewhere that might be a bit colder. Maybe we get a fireplace and then we bring it out again. And it'll, as you said, it'll get probably passed down to the kids, depending on where they choose to live and who wants it and that sort of thing. But they're beautiful items that you get, and they're generally very solid and long lasting, which is good.
Kind of point. Yeah.
So you do something called primitive blacksmithing. So how would that differ? What does that mean to you?
All right. So a lot of that is, I kind of take it from my idea of what it would have been many years ago, right? So that comes from making the charcoal. I teach it, the Smithcraft, both primitive blacksmithing and magical blacksmithing too. I teach both of those here, but the primitive style is more, we literally will dig a hole in the ground and learn to smith right in the hole.
Does it get enough?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it does because you do it.
Yeah. I mean, you can do pretty much anything but weld with it,
mm-hmm.
right? But you can, for the base part, forge from it. Yeah. I mean, without a doubt. We've been heating, moving metal since the Copper Age. The thing is, nothing's changed, really. For the most part, I mean, you get it hot and hit it hard. I mean, that's, we've kind of changed the way our hammers look. We've changed the bigger hammers. We've, used propane, or we've used coal. Some places are actually using electricity now, the induction. So there's a lot of different ways, but you still, at the end of the day, you still get it hot and you still hit it hard. So yeah, it's fun because I like to look at it as a way to help continue the craft, because everybody thinks about how expensive it is, because it can be a craft that you spend a lot of money on. And don't get me wrong, you can spend a lot of money on it, but you don't need to. Mm. Especially if you're just learning out, and what a better way of doing it than learn to make your own magical stuff.
Yeah.
I got people come up here and spend the weekend within Circle. We got about 9 acres here, and we just have magic the whole weekend, or we're making metal magical stuff. Mm-hmm. Whatever they want to make. Yes, it'll take the lid off.
So with those sorts of things, when you're helping teach people, or even when you're doing it yourself, is it the fact that you're making a magical tool that makes it magical blacksmithing, or is there more magic to it as well?
Yes. Both. It's both. Well, I guess, lack of a better word, I don't like definitions, but I think I'm probably much more of a chaos magician mm-hmm. than anything else. I've been doing this since the 90s. Mm. That kind of dates me a little bit. And I've seen a lot of changes, through the years, being in leadership roles then and kind of sort of now too. And I try not to get hung up on absolutes, and I try not to get hung up on this is the way, because this is the way has changed a lot over the 30 years that I've been doing this. So it's the way now. Mm-hmm. So I try to leave that open. And I think with the magic, for me, I do add in a lot of magic of myself, of actually doing the work, right? First off, my smith, I'm a priest of the Morrigan, so my smithy is dedicated to her. So I've got that kind of going on, so there's kind of hard to avoid that. And I got her shrine that I look at literally as I smith. but setting the space, and I think intention means a lot, right? To me, intention carries a lot more weight than a lot of other stuff, right? I mean, you can have all the tchotchkes in the world, and eye of newt and wings of bats, and you have all the right ingredients, but if you don't have the proper intention, it just is what it is. My thought, right? So I think going into it, knowing that you're making something special, unique for someone else so that they can do what it is that they need to do, right? Whether it's they need protection, whether they need, courage, whether they need to kind of, strength, whether they need, to mellow out, whether they, whatever it is that they're needing help with, I think having the intent in the beginning, working that into it from the beginning, getting the metal to buy in, hey, this is what I need to do. I need to make one of these. Who wants to be that? The whole process to get to the finished result of now I have a cool piece. So yeah, I mean, I think the magic, a lot of it is the intent of actually doing the work.
Yeah. It's like
and then
blessing and dedicating it as you create.
Yeah, and it, I become attached to it because I'm making it, right? So I'm kind of a co-creator, because I can do it to where the person that I'm creating for can be in that space, and we can share that time of them adding their intention into it as I'm doing it, no matter where they are, right? And I think time's kind of flat sometimes, right? So I think once again, what's the object of the exercise? If you want to make something that's, has a lot of intention, has a lot of juice, what I like to call it, has a lot of juice out of the gate, then that's how you start out with, I think the foundation that you build, it's a lot easier to build it correctly the first time than have to go back and redo it, right? My thought.
So
I don't know if I answered your question or if I'm just kind of rambling off.
So were you raised in a magical household? Is blacksmithing in your family? Where did it all come from?
No, I'm my family's Southern Baptist. Granddaddy was a Southern Baptist. It's just, well, we grew up way back there where nobody, our family trees didn't fork, right? So it was just, it was a little bitty place out in the mountains, out in the middle of nowhere. And everybody was pretty much, Baptist, that's what you were. And I didn't get into thinking about paganism or even having any idea that was a thing, right? Because this was way back before the internet, before you knew stuff. You had to like use encyclopedias and stuff to actually learn things. So I didn't even know there was such a thing of it until, till the 90s, and then once I kind of picked up on it, I was like, hey, that'd be kind of cool, because I've always had that kind of, King Arthur, the knights, the medieval, the romance of all that period, right? It would really suck to live there, but it's, looking at it from 2023, it doesn't seem too bad. Christians are pretty magical too.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, I've met some folks that, they got some juice behind them, so I think, I don't think pagans have the corner on the market with magic, and I've been to New Orleans, I've been around there, I've been to some folks that that can do some pretty cool stuff, even in the Christian. I mean, I've had them talk fire out of it, preachers talk fire out of a burn and stuff. So I just, I think sometimes we get too hung up on, I've seen people get too hung up on things.
Yeah.
I know words mean stuff, but at the end of the day, what's the object of the exercise and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I've done a bit of content on how there are a lot of crossovers between especially evangelical style Christianity or Pentecostal. Yes, I was raised Pentecostal, so I see a lot of similarities in the gifts of the Spirit. I spoke about it recently with Mortellis, who is also dedicated to the Morrigan and in North Carolina. So you guys are kind of close by. They were on episode 35 and episode 5. And yeah, we talked as well about a lot of the crossovers in the words and the similarities that there are between the two. And the Bible is a very magical book as well, if you want to use it that way. But never say that to a Christian because they'll get upset.
Yeah, they use different words for it.
Yeah.
You just have to speak a different language with them, But I think I just spend more time trying to figure out what it is that I'm doing and not worrying about what everybody else is doing.
Mm. Do you think because of where you've grown up in the Appalachian Mountains, I know you said your Irish heritage informs a lot of your practice, but do you think some of those folk tales like the Silver Bullet and things like that, have they informed your practice? Did you grow up hearing those sorts of stories about witches as well?
Not anything that would just kind of make you go, right? Not really. You growing up the way we did, I grew up close to in a town that had one of the part of the Cherokee Nation reservations there. So we had a lot of bleed over, into the first people's kind of stuff. I think sometimes I know for me, I used to get really hung up on some of that comparing and looking at. I just don't focus that much up on it. Mm-hmm. One, I live up in the middle of nowhere, so I don't have a whole lot of contact unless it's pretty much like this. Yeah. I get I literally go to town like twice a month, and get groceries and come back. I just don't see anybody. I like it. Mm-hmm. I'm happy being a curmudgeon, and a hermit. I kind of enjoy my hermit status, although that's not necessarily what I'm supposed to be doing, which is probably why I like doing it. But I think that there's a lot of great things that we can take from that tradition because none of us are as smart as all of us. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think if you can, I think for me, my challenge in this life is to figure out what it is for me. Mm. And I think a lot of times, if you can take a lot of those little bits and pieces from your journey along the way that does work for you and make your own gig, I don't see anything wrong with that because if it works for you, it works.
Yeah, definitely.
As long as your end result's the same, I don't care. Mm-hmm. Because I'll tell people at class, you can ask 5 different blacksmiths a question and you'll get about 27 different answers. And none of them are necessarily wrong. It's just a different way of doing something. And I think, if we spent more time focusing on the object of the exercise and less time worrying about everybody else, we would actually kind of get something done, I think. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I'm living in La La Land half the time anyway.
Oh, it's good. And so with some of the things that you make, so you showed the divination dice earlier. Do you make any other, I think I saw runes on your website. Are they?
They're the ohm. Yes, I do. I do ohm. There's not much I don't make. I do make knives, daggers, spears. I've made a sword. I've made knots. Just pendants. But I make probably more pendants than anything else because that's what people use.
Mm-hmm. Like a talisman, amulet.
Yeah, or an amulet kind of thing. So I think that's our pocket notion, which is kind of the same thing, except you can put it in your pocket or on a key ring or something like that. So that's a lot more of what I make than anything else. Incense hold. I mean, there's really not anything I can't make. It's just what I spend most of my time. Wands are real popular right now, metal wands, which are really kind of cool. Of course, I'm a little prejudiced, but but there's just so much to it. I'm sitting here looking at my altar going, yeah, I got all that stuff, but it's, I'm a little skewed because I have access to making all the stuff. It's like if I need something, I'll just go make it.
Do you have a favorite metal tool that you use?
Other than the die would be my sword. Mm-hmm. I made a short sword, and I made it with the thought of one, I didn't want to make it. A lot of stuff that gets done around here, I don't want to do. I didn't want to write the book. Yeah. I don't speak English, and writing English sucks. Because it's a different language. It really is. It's like that's not how you say that. But anyway, yeah, the sword by far. It's hold on a second. I'll grab it if you want to look at it.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is a piece that I made last year, and it was one of those things where she's like, I need a sword. And I'm like, no, you don't. That's how most of our conversations start out. I need you to do so and so. And I'm usually like, no, you don't. You know, I'm not the droid you're looking for. You know, that's how most of our conversations start. But like I said, everything that I make is repurposed. So everything with this is made out of repurposed material. And it's not huge, it's more of a short sword, right? So this piece, the metal piece here, it's steel, was actually it was a tiller tine. I don't know if you're making a garden, you've got the machine that's got like these teeth, metal teeth that turn around that you use to plow up the dirt, right? We call them tillers. I don't know what everybody else calls them.
Yeah, you till the. I know the word till the earth, but yeah, tiller I probably wouldn't have recognized straight off. But
so it's anything that you use for gardening, right? To break up the dirt so you can plant, right?
Like a circular rake.
Maybe that's it. I don't think you say tomato, I say tomato, whatever, right? You know, yeah. So this is the tine, one of those pieces, you know, because they come down and they bend at an angle, right? So I found this down in the woods because people around here, you know, they don't mind their manners. They just consider every place their own private junkyard. But I also look at now it's my hardware store because I can run down there and go get something that I need, right? Because that's actually where one of the bolt holes, right, where it was bolted on. So I left that on there. So I've got this one and it's tempered, so you can see the blue one of metal, and it runs all the way along. And then I've got a copper handguard that was everything on this piece was junk, right? There is a copper piece on this side that I've got the sword's name and on the other side is bronze. So I've got the copper age, the bronze age, and the iron age all in the palm of my hand.
I like that.
So I kind of like that too. I thought that was cool. But I take this down when I do my forgings, my sacred forgings, because I use this to bear witness to my forging. Right? So it's that kind of checks and balances, lack of a better word. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I always associate swords with truth and honesty and
okay.
Justice and all of that. So like they I don't know what the word is. They help us to do things in our truth. And I like that you say bearing witness as well. It's like keeping you true, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that's what that once again, it's a guarantee, right? You know, because I use this sword, and then there's a few other people that have used it at certain events for gardening and for ceremonial uses. But other than that, it doesn't go far from the smithy. That's the only place it does go. That's not here. You know, because there's a story within the Irish mythology about around Samhain, all the warriors would come back and they would lay their swords on their laps as they boasted of their events for the year, right? I think boasting is a great word. Personally, I love that word. You know, it's not really, you know, my grandmother said it, you know, it ain't bragging if it's true, right?
My dad always said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
You know, and I'm thinking, so they would lay them on their laps, right? So that if they over boasted, right, we'll say that, the sword would actually cut them. So that way they used the sword to kind of make sure that what the stories they were telling weren't too colorful, right? So they stayed within the guidelines of whatever the Irish storytelling was at the time. But yeah, so it's, I kind of get that idea, and then you've got other stories within the mythology of, they unsheath the slain sword and clean it, give it tribute, and the sword, tells everything that had been done by it, right? So the history of the sword, which I get those images in my head. I'm thinking, man, that's cool. I like that.
It's powerful. It's powerful.
Yes. I mean, well, and once again, it's an extension of myself, right? Because I literally, everything that's made up of this sword, I have within me personally. So there's, it's separate, but it's not, and I think that's the thing that I wanted to try to get out with the book is that, one, anybody can do it. You don't need to be a blacksmith to work metal magic, right? Two, it's vital that we get back to working with it, I think, because I think since the Industrial Revolution, we've kind of cut that part of us off. And I think it's a very valuable and vital part of our makeup that we need to reintroduce into our practice. It's not expensive. You don't need to do anything different. You don't need to go buy a bunch of stuff. You don't even have to do any work with it. I think you just need to be open to working with it. My thought is, man, how much more invigorating, how much more juicy can your practice be if you have allies instead of tools? To me, allies work much better than tools do, right? So in taking the time, but I think a lot of us, I'll speak to me, time use that word as an excuse, to where I don't have time to build the relationship. Because I think that's the key, right? Is you got to build a relationship with your tool, so you got to spend time with it. And it's kind of that double-edged sword, but and I think that's what I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole here, but it's kind of like, that's why our relationships suck so bad, because we don't invest time. It ain't easy. A magical practice is not easy. I don't, maybe I'm doing it wrong, right? But for me, it ain't easy. It's a lot of friggin' work. I would much rather roll over and hit snooze and skip my morning check-ins. She wouldn't allow that to go on very long. But that's part of the practice.
Yeah. It's funny because I have seen, we've seen a lot of shifting, I think, in the recent years of people going back to, lost art forms or lost practices, or things that, even moving back to things like using, what are they called? The cast iron cookware, right? A huge lot of people going back to that, mainly because a lot of the other ones
I never left.
PFAs. I love a good cast iron pot or pan, but people used to think, oh no, stuff will get stick to it, or it's heavy, or it's too much work to season. But once you do, then it's good. It's good for life. And again, it's a hand-me-down. And if anyone does any form of kitchen witchery, think about that as being, yes, an ally and a tool and something that you can work with. And if you're doing, making, let's say, a magical healing soup, maybe because it's going to remember a little bit of that, I think metal holds energy, that it's going to, next time you make it, it's like, oh, sweet, I got this. I remember from last time, let's boost it up a little bit more. And every time you do it, you're layering and you're building that relationship with that ally, that tool that you're using. So I think it can be super versatile, even if someone might not want a sword or anything like that, but most people cook.
Well, I think swords are way overrated. Really, it's like, everybody wants one because they're shiny, sharp, and pointy. But what are you going to do with it? Practicality, right? Like I'm not walking through Walmart with this thing on my hip. It's just, it's just not what it's not part of my everyday carry, right? But I think your point is spot on. I think most people don't know what they have. Even though you may not have cast iron, and our cast iron has been passed down from my grandparents. I've got a pan from my grandmother, and my wife, my beloved, she has one from her granddaddy. That we use as part of our collection, and we have a stack of cast iron. It's what we do, right? But I think definitely using the metal within that to create those nutritious, healthy, full of flavor. Flavor is important.
It also
full of flavor meals, right?
It imparts, if you're using cast iron, it imparts some iron into your food.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is beneficial for us as well, right? So unless you have too much iron, which is not super common. I do have a friend, she thought she had low iron. Her mum kept saying, you're tired, you're getting headaches, you obviously got low iron, take iron tablets. So she started taking iron tablets and getting worse, and then had a blood test and realized she was the opposite. She had too much iron, which is the same symptoms. So she started donating blood every 2 weeks, I think, for a while. And then she got to a good baseline. So,
and like I said, I talk about ways to do this to where it's not expensive. You don't need to spend a lot of money to do this crap. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of new gizmos. You can go down to your big box store and get you a box of washers and you're good to go.
Coins as
washers,
well.
coins. Yeah. You got,
Everyone's
our penny is made out of copper.
Mm.
Used to be, it's not anymore. It used to be made out of solid copper,
Yeah.
right? But you've got, there's metal everywhere. If you literally took and just did an inventory, like I said, I talk about it in my book and I break it down into several sections, where if you just inventory what you currently have, you'd be shocked at what you currently have.
Yeah, I bet.
You don't even see it. It's like you rearrange a room and all of a sudden you have all this new stuff. Because you forget to see it. You being in the military, you're moving all the time.
Yep.
So you're all the time have brand new stuff all the time. You're like, oh man, I forgot we had that.
Yeah, you go to move and realize you've got a box you forgot to unpack 2 years ago, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, you go, I've been looking for this. Or when did we get this? Yeah. So I'm really kind of on this mission to get people re-energized and re-engaged in working with the metal, because I think you're just, with it being a part of ourselves, it's just a way to kind of help us be a little bit more complete. And you're adding in, like I said, allies, if you have that animist kind of point of view into your magical practice to help you with your work. Yeah. Right. And it can be as elaborate, and it can be as simple as you want, right? How magical is a key?
Yes.
That key is metal. You look at it and say, okay, well, I'm going to use this to lock up, and to use as a warding, set my wards for my home when I leave. So I'm locking my door with the key. That's metal on metal, right? But you also use it to put it in the ignition, if you have a car that does that these days, to start your car to go somewhere. So it actually, you can use metal to put things in motion, right? So
and to unlock and open doors and
exactly, so there's depending on what you want to do, and I think sometimes I'm guilty of this. All right, so I'm gonna talk about me. I want one thing to do a bunch of different stuff. And that's really not always, for me, the best way to go about that. Sometimes it's better to have one thing that does one thing and does it really well, than to get something that does jack of all trades and doesn't really do any of them well, right? Because it's like the wards. I made wards for our home around the outside of our property, and that's what they do. It's not a yes and. It's, oh yeah, well, we also, we hold party lights too. Well, I guess they could, but those don't. Yeah. So.
Yeah, fair. So in your book, is it a lot of the getting people to realize, I guess, the value in the metal that they have already accessible to them, how to work with it, and what different metals can bring to the table? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I mainly talk about the four, but I go through exercises. I call it action steps, and there's a bunch of them throughout the book. And if I personally think if you work them right and you do the steps that I've got and you read the book, it's not a thick book. You hear me talk, so it ain't got a bunch of big words in it, right? It's just not how I roll. But I definitely think if you do the work, it'll literally change your life, and it'll change it for the better. You'll never be the same. Your magical practice will be completely different, I think, for the better. But I know my life before and my life after, and it has been it's changed my practice a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Not so focused on outside stuff, right? I don't need to go to the crystal store, not knocking crystals, right? There's a lot of things I don't feel the need to do anymore, where metal has become that substitute.
Can anybody, in terms of if someone reads the book and they get really interested in metal magic and maybe they want to start learning blacksmithing, is it something anyone can do? Do you have to be particularly strong?
No.
What's the steps in?
I wrote in the back a little bit, and it's some tools to where you don't even actually have to do any blacksmithing, right? So you can just literally just do them at home with tools you probably have in a toolbox, that you currently have. Nothing really unique, but most big cities around here have what they call they call them maker spaces, to where there's almost like a warehouse, and they teach all these different vocational type things. It's like you can do learn woodworking and sewing and welding and there's like all this kind of stuff. And I know because I teach at one and I teach blacksmithing there. So a lot of times you can just get into that. I learned by trial, I took a class like what I teach and the rest of it's just been plinking, right? It's just seeing what happens, how you learn, you practice.
And it's creative. I love that it's this magical creative outlet. Personally, I think intuition and creativity are pretty much the same energy. And so when you can utilize them both at the same time, I think it makes things extra magical. And that's just my opinion.
Well, and it's been kind of fun, not in a ha-ha way, but in things that make you a kind of way, is to watch the metal work. Because I mean, there are times I know I'm just showing up and paying attention, right? And I'm not, because there's stuff I've walked out of that smithy, I'm going, how in the hell did I do that?
I can't remember who said it. Some famous sculptor, probably Michelangelo or something, said that they're not sculpting an image onto the marble. They're finding what's in the marble, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think I know what you're talking about now, and that's totally it.
Yeah.
That's totally it. Because I made a wand for this person in France actually, and we went and did crystal shopping together, not together, but I would take pictures and send them. Do you want this one, whatever? And then during the actual forging of it, what I had in my mind was not at all what came out, because I was starting to work on it, and literally it was like, no, not like that, like this. No, you don't need to do that, and you need to do this. And it turned out like stunning, much better than what I had in my mind. So hey, bonus, as it does sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I love it. It's such an interesting art form, and I think it's wonderful to bring magic into it as well, and something I haven't seen a lot of. So I think you've really found that little space that I think might appeal to a lot of people as well.
Well, I think that's why I wrote the book. Well, like I said, it wasn't something I looked for, because I started getting these things just from my work, right? As I'm working, I'm thinking, gee, magic and metal, that's kind of cool. I need to find someone that does this. I couldn't find anybody. And, you can do Metal Magick search, and you might get properties, 2 or 3 things, and this is what steel is, and this is what copper is. That's it. There's nothing more than a cheat sheet, right? And I was like, man, that really kind of sucks, and she's like, well, I guess you're writing a book. I was like, no, I'm not. No. And it was my hope to write it in a way that people could understand it. People could get into doing the work and see the value in doing the work, more than anything else. Because I just think it's important that people reconnect to that, because it's all around us.
Yeah.
Literally. We don't see it, we don't pay attention to it, because it's just something that we see all the time, so we don't see it anymore.
Even when you said keys, and then when I thought of coins, I was like, I didn't even think of those until they sort of popped up here. So I think a lot of other people will have a bit of a aha moment as well when they look around them. So it's...
Yeah, because I mean, I take them through step by step. I'm not so much promoting the book. That's why I wrote the book, right? Step by step on how to start your foundation to work with the different magical pieces, what you have in your home currently, and how they interact with each other, how you can interact with them. And once again, this is all, I don't have the corner on the market kind of thing. This is just kind of what I've figured out, and how they come to me. And just because I say it's this way doesn't mean that's the way it is, right? Because you may have a completely different interaction with steel than I do, because your relationship may be different. So you may see it as more of a warm, cuddly kind of metal, but that doesn't work with me. And that's okay. One's not wrong and one's not right. It's just we interpret things differently.
Yeah.
And I think we need to get more open into allowing people to interpret things as they need to. Not too much gatekeeping going on. It's just, chill out, snapperhead. Just you do the work and worry about what I'm doing later.
And with...
Get off my lawn. Sorry.
So lastly, with metals, I am curious, do they all seem to work and play together nicely? When you showed the sword, which had a mixture of them, do they all seem to because I have, for example, certain crystals when I use crystals that I probably wouldn't wear together because they just don't vibe together. Do you find it all with metals, or do they all seem to fit together nicely?
For the most part, I think they all work together pretty well. Well, I mean, you're looking at, you've got steel, right? Iron. And then the other three that I work with are basically cousins, right? Because you got copper, and then you've got copper and tin, right, which is bronze, and you got copper and zinc, which is brass. So they're kind of cousins, right? So I think they all kind of play, even though they all do something completely different. I think for the most part they play pretty well together.
Sorry, so is tin in copper or is copper in tin?
No, you mix the two together, and that's what makes bronze.
Gotcha.
It's an alloy. It's an alloy. So it's a blend of two metals. So you've got copper and tin is bronze, and then you've got copper and zinc, which is brass.
Gotcha.
So it's a blend. It's an alloy.
When I was watching, I love watching Escape to the Country. Oh, no, Escape to the Chateau. I like both, but Escape to the Chateau, I don't know if you've ever watched it. And he cooks with copper pans, pots and pans, and they had to get them coated in tin, I believe, in order to use them safely. And so then for a second I was like, wait a minute, does that make something new? But no, they're separate. The one's coating the other. But again, if someone has copper cookware, they could utilize that in their magic as well.
Yeah, a lot of people, I mean, you look at, I think the country India, they have a lot of their thoughts of drinking from copper as a health benefit, which is true because it has a lot of minerals that you get from it that they currently don't get out of their soil. Where I'm at, we get copper naturally through the vegetables and stuff that we eat, that comes in naturally. So we don't need a copper supplement. Whereas I think where they are, they don't have that same type of soil. So therefore they use a lot of the copper to eat and drink out of to help.
Yeah, that's a big part of Ayurveda, using the drinking vessels and things like that. When I traveled India, even things like having foot baths in big beautiful copper bowls, and there were drink bottles made from copper, and it's a very beautiful metal as well. When it's got the bumps in it, I guess, is from
the hammering.
It's beautiful the way it has that effect. So it's
it has a blood feel to me at times, because it has a real low melting point, but it's just that kind of slow ooze, right? It's that kind of regeneration, it's that kind of, I always kind of looked at steel being the bones and copper being the blood of the earth. It's kind of how I always kind of, in my mind, equated those two.
Have you got any like astrological correspondences that you use with the different metals, or?
No.
I can just,
I'm not there's anything wrong with it. I'm not there.
Yeah. I as you were talking, I was just kind of feeling like steel would be probably the either the Saturn or the Capricorn sort of vibes that strengthen.
Well, I think a lot of people equate it with Mars because of the warlikeness of the steel. So I don't know. Like I said, I am not the guy to be talking about that kind of stuff.
I've got no idea. It would all be just.
I'm a neophyte with that stuff. I just nod my head like I know what I'm talking about.
If anyone knows, feel free to send a message or comment, and we'll share if there are any correspondences with those, because that would be really interesting to know.
Because if you think about, the old way of doing smith work was very elemental, because you had brought that up earlier, and I meant to chime in with it. But you've got the air of either your bellows or whatever you're using to blow air into the forge, right? You've got the earth of the forge itself. My forge is literally a box of dirt, literally. Back to the primitive thing, I don't, it's just I need to make it so it works.
Yeah.
So you've got the fire of that, right? You've got your water of your quench tank.
What's that?
Right. Where you dip the hot metal in, it goes
to cool it off. Yep.
Yeah, the cooling tank. They call it a quench tank, right? So you got air, then you've got fire, and then you've got the fire of the forge itself. You've got the earth of the forge, and then you've got the water, and then you have the spirit of the smith. So you've got all 5 elements built in there to create one.
Yeah, and then
if you think that way.
You mentioned as well earlier the Eastern philosophy. So I know that in Chinese philosophy, and especially in Chinese health and medicine, so they have they recognize as elements fire, air, earth, water, but also metal and wood, which you are working with metal, and then you'd have the wood for the fire, for the charcoal as well. So you'd have all of those elements. And the interesting thing I think with that, they call it, I'm learning Mandarin, so I do know this.
Ooh, you go.
Yeah, I know. It's not an easy language. It is Wu Xing. The tones are Wu Xing. So it's like 5, and then the Xing is meant to be like falling star, and some people say it means elements. But they were actually named after the 5. So all of their elements do have the correspondences to Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter, what they call the 5 main planets. And then when you're doing anything health-wise with Chinese medicine, and this is not my specialty, this is just an interest I have because I do use Chinese medicine for myself. I think there's often a balance of all of those depending on what issues are being presented. So they're always trying to balance them out. But it's really intriguing how they sort of bring elements in astrology and all of that together. I find it fascinating. And it's really cool to see that almost represented in your smithing practice, even potentially unconsciously as well, that there's all of those present in order to make the finished piece. I think it feels really balanced.
As I was doing studying for the book, the thing that I thought was really kind of cool was all the traditions being from all over the world were all real similar as it related to Metal Magick. Which I thought was really kind of cool. Yeah, there were some variances, right? And you've got some backgrounds and some things that don't quite, match up perfect, but they were all very similar. It's like even when you look at the Japanese, you look at some of the history with the samurai, when they would vanquish someone, the spirit was in their sword. So they captured their, so it was adding that energy, adding that thought process, adding, that, lack of a better word, that mythology into it too. Thought, wow, that's really kind of cool, because then you've got, with the Irish, you've got the animate, with the North, a lot of the Norse traditions, dealing with the dwarves that made, I don't know a whole lot about the Norse tradition. So, but they all have some of these Samaria, Greece, Egypt, they all have the same type of overlaying, where up until the Industrial Revolution, being a blacksmith was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's still cool, personally.
Well, I still think it's cool too. But I mean, it was, the blacksmiths were, they were the linchpin of society. It
was crucial.
There wasn't anything in the town, village, city, whatever, that did not come through the blacksmith shop. He literally touched everything.
Well, the association with transport in terms of horses, horseshoes, horse carriages,
the wheels, making all the metal rims for the wagon reels. I mean, there's nothing in the town that I haven't found anything yet that the blacksmith wasn't involved some way, somehow.
Nails.
Yeah.
Lots. Yeah, there's
lots of them.
This is a really random question, and it may not.
Sure.
I feel like you might not know it. But
you cut it out if you don't like it. We'll go for it.
There's a book called The Wheel of Time. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, Robert Jordan. Yeah.
Yes. Good. Because
I'm rereading it as we speak.
Are you?
Read it at night. Help me go to sleep.
I've read it all through once, and for anyone listening, it's like 14 books, and they're about 1,000 pages each. It's an epic. I think
I started in 1996, and I finished it up a few years ago.
Yeah, it took me 2 years, and I'm like a fast, obsessive reader. It took me 2 years to get through them. When I was pregnant, that was my escape. And my husband started once I finished, and that was 4 years ago, and he's still reading. It's like book 9 or 10, I think. Fantastic series. But that whole vibe, when you said earlier, and it just made me think of Perrin. There's a character in there, Perrin. Yeah. And if anyone doesn't want to read the books, there is a series on Amazon Prime that's out at the moment. Have you watched it?
Yeah, I think they've got the first book, or something like that.
Yeah, they've kind of put the first book, and they changed a few things, but I understand.
They're going to. Yeah, you can't. I mean, the book's like that. You got you have 6 episodes. That's more than that.
You cannot get it all in there. Yeah. But yeah, Perrin has this really interesting. He's a blacksmith, and he has this really interesting, back and forth about the fact that he's making weapons, but they're also tools. But it's this real sort of pulling, this tension he has throughout the whole books, that what he's making then harms, and he doesn't want to harm anyone. And it's just this really interesting way, because he's such a gentle character and he wants everything to be, equal and lovely and kind. And I sort of get that vibe from you, that very I don't want to take too many resources, I'm reusing, it's a tool and we have this relationship with it. And I just saw that sort of relation. I was like, gosh, I'm going to bring it up, but if he hasn't read it, he's going to have no idea what I'm talking about.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I just think, I think our magical practice is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah,
my thought is you either, you make it, or you pay to have it made.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we have within our community, speaking pagan umbrella, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really big umbrella. We have some phenomenal people in our community.
Yep.
That do some just real stuff, the level of talent that's I know there's blacksmiths that, I don't even hold a candle to. I've seen some of their work and said, whoa, because it's gorgeous work, right? But I think, we spend so much time, I've probably said this 3 or 4 times, collecting stuff.
Mm.
We need to quit being collectors and be users.
Yeah.
I want to see people get more involved in the metal magic aspect, but I want to see more people doing work.
Mm.
Right? Our world would be so much better off if we would just do work.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time talking about stuff, but we're not judgment. We're not doing jack about it.
I feel a little bit pulled out because there's 2 beautiful candles on my altar behind me. And I've had them there for, I think, almost a year because they're so pretty. I don't want to burn them, but then I'm like, I'm not using them. I use other ones, but I probably should. They're just like it's really nice. But as I had that thought, I was like, hey, they're in metal candle holders. How about I might even do something with that even today, do something to almost even just welcome the energy of metal, because I've not done that before.
Well, and just take my suggestion there, and I'm going to abbreviate the if you really want to dive down into it a little bit more, get the book, right? But I'm going to abbreviate it. It's an acronym called FLOW, FLOW. Okay, prior service. I love my acronyms, right? It's the way I remember stuff.
Yeah. Oh gosh, don't talk about acronyms. I feel like I have. Oh gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, everything's got an acronym, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the first one, the F is feel. It's just feel. Take time, feel the metal. Go for a walk. Go sit outside. Go sit in a room somewhere without distractions, and just feel the metal. Just see if it has a pulse. See what it. Is it hot? Is it cold? How does that change? Play with it. Fondle it. Get to know it. And then listen. Right. Is there a story that needs to be told? Is there something that it wants to be involved in? My grandmother said you catch a lot more flies with honey than you do vinegar. So maybe this metal piece wants to actively be doing something, and you're doing something else with it. And it may be more productive doing something else, right? A candle holder, right? You've got one that's just wants to be there for honoring the ancestors, right? For those, for hailing the traveler.
Yeah.
Because I know people that have those. That's what they do. They like that one. Anytime somebody's crossing over, they like that candle holder, and that's its job. But and then you have one just mainly for prayers or whatnot, right? But you take time and you're feeling it and you're listening to the stories, and then you're going to be open, getting to the tail end of that listen, being open to what it wants to do. Or the work y'all have to do together, right? Because it's a relationship, right? And relationships they're good, healthy relationships are 2-way, right? Where you give as much, not necessarily you don't give as much as you take, because that's 50-50. And I don't think it works like that all the time. Yeah. Sometimes it's 60-40, sometimes it's 80-20. You're married, that, right? Relationships, they ebb and flow, right? So the relationship is a relationship. I don't think that changes depending on whether it's a cat, dog, human, metal, whatever, right? So you're open to the work. And you have to do all those three things before you actually get to the W, which is do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can't just walk to the center of the labyrinth and get the same benefit as you would walking the labyrinth. Mm. There's no shortcuts in this. You know that.
Yep. You know, learn lessons.
You know, you can't order a spell something or other off online and have it do. You think it's going to do the work? That's not how. It doesn't work that way. Mm. It'd be nice if it did. You know, if Magic was like your Sears and Roebuck catalog, right? And you just go to Amazon and you order. Hey, I'm rich. In 3 days when that shit shows up, I'm gonna be rich as hell. I'm on prime time shipping there. Yep. I'm good. It does not work that way. So if you'll start taking some of your items and start looking at that, and take some time with them, listen to them, be open to what they want, be open to a little bit of craziness because it's going to feel a little awkward. Okay, mm-hmm. Still feel awkward. I still feel crazy sometimes. And you'll be surprised at what you come up with and what it comes up with. And intuition and creativity, I love that because they really are. They run together pretty close.
Yeah.
Now that you said, I'm looking at it going, yeah, well, I mean, how creative can you be?
Well, right? When I think of creativity, it's like, where does it come from? Does it actually come from us? Or are we intuitively, I know Australia Taylor writes on the muses and, other creative inspirations, and perhaps it's coming, that creativity is coming from something else and we're just a vessel, right? We're just picking it up and then the one that can make it turn into something. And creativity of all kinds is a very liminal space. And that mm-hmm. is very magical, right? I'm sure in between when you're making something, between it being, unmade and being made, that is a liminal space, right? That is
most definitely
very, very thin places. Your smithy is probably a thin place where you can do some amazing magic. And
I think so.
Same with, the artist who is painting something or the writer who is writing something. I think creativity itself begets thin places and magic and intuition. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing. So where can people find you online? Where can people find you and buy your book as well?
Get me at ravenskeepforge.com. And that's pretty much everything. It's Facebook, Ravens Keep Forge, Instagram, Ravens Keep Forge, YouTube, Ravens Keep Forge, Patreon. I got Patreon on there too.
Awesome.
Same thing. Yeah, pretty much it. It shouldn't be hard.
Awesome. And your book it's available on Amazon as well, and your website.
Yeah, you can Kindle it. If you're on the unlimited, I don't know how it works over there, but if you're on the unlimited, I think it's on there you can read it for free if you're Kindle unlimited. But yeah, it's Metal Never Lies, an introduction to Metal Magic.
Oh, an introduction. Is that a hint that there might be a deeper dive?
God, I hope not. I don't know. I just show up and go, yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
most part. Yeah. I know I'm working on how to do metal work, right? So how to take a washer and what kind of metal magic can you do with a washer? Mm-hmm. So I want to do things where people can do them.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And you don't have to have, once again, you don't have to have all the spiffy stuff. You can, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with nice, cool stuff, but I don't think you need to have it in order for it to be effective.
Yeah. Accessible magic is good magic. Magic always worked, right? You use.
I'm Appalachian, we're spitting some dirt and you roll, and you got magic, you may not want it, but you got it, Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I'll pop all of those links in the description box for everyone to find below in this episode. And you guys always know, for me, just suburbanwitchery.com to come to any of my virtual classes. Sometimes I've got in-person ones sporadically as well. If you're not on my email list, that's where I will be promoting those. And you can also work with me one-on-one with a guidance call. So suburbanwitchery.com for those ones, and ravenskeepforge.com if you want to go with Sam as well. So thank you so much for your time, Sam, today. It's been
Thank you. I know our time has been kind of wonky with us being on opposite ends of the world, which I think is really cool.
I'm used to it now, but
it's whatever.
It's a tough one. Doing the Doing the two time zones can be rough, but thank you very much for staying up a little bit later than usual to
And I
chat.
hope you get feeling better.
Thank
soon.
you very much. I appreciate that.
I can't imagine, but yeah, I hope you get feeling better soon. Thanks for the invite. Anybody has any questions about anything, please don't hesitate. I'm easy to get in touch with. Just message me and I'll get to you as soon as I can. I'll be glad to help.
Thank you, Sam. I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening, and we'll chat with you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Wasn't that wonderful? As usual, all the links are in the description box below, and I did want to make a note as well. If you didn't know already, if you're not on my mailing list, I have a new website. I have redone my website. It was literally the biggest business expense I have ever undertaken, which was terrifying, but I wanted it done right, and it is so much more user-friendly now. It is easy to navigate. It feels like me. It looks good, so definitely check it out. The search function is working properly, which it didn't for like 4 years because I did it myself and I don't know what I did wrong. But now I've had a professional do it and it all looks amazing. You may have heard me say before as well that I am considering moving off Patreon. So I haven't really been promoting it as much. Like, I'm still on there, guys. You get behind the scenes stuff, all this amazing stuff over on Patreon. But in saying that, I will be switching over to my website as my private membership area, like where it goes through, just because Patreon takes like a couple of $1,000s from me every year, which is not great. But if you want access to all of the amazing stuff that Patreons get, which is monthly readings with me on a group call, behind the scenes, uncut, unedited podcast episodes and bloopers, and access to my private Facebook group where we have amazing discussion and connection, all of those things are still up on Patreon. It's going to take a little while to get the private thing on my website underway, and there'll be plenty of notice for people to swap over. So if you're interested, I would love to see you over there. But until then, I will chat with you all next time.